Hello, welcome to Citizens Forum. It's Wednesday, May the 10th. The first segment is the Walt and Jack Show. So, Walt.
Hello, Jack.
Hello, Walt.
So we're going to talk about that election?
Yeah, when everybody sees this, it's going to be a week from now, but
Yeah.
actually the election was yesterday.
Yeah. Well, so it'll be a little bit old news, but there's a lot of new things to think about. I didn't think about this result, a minority government, the possibility of minority government. I got up this morning, I felt pretty darn good about it. I think the people were going to win for a while. And I think this is a good deal. I mean, they're going to have to cooperate. Oh my God, they're going to have to cooperate? What a new idea. There's a lot of problems with it. And I think both the Liberals and the NDP have a lot of interest in ending a minority government. Both will probably want to, get a majority themselves and have their own little dictatorships. But as long as the Greens can keep this afloat, we might get a few things done. It's possible.
Well, it would be nice. My thought was, as I was talking to you earlier, I said, the pretense that we even have a democracy in British Columbia, there is very, very little democracy in Canada. That is one of our number one problems. But, we have the election, I walked in, put an X in a box, the whole thing took 2 minutes. And really, from the politicians' point of view, that's the last they want to hear from me or any of us for the next 4 years. That is not democracy. Democracy means that on something like Site C or fracking or housing policy or the Massey Bridge or whatever they're doing, democracy means they inform us about the facts of the matter, and then they come and find out what we want, and then they try to do it. That's democracy. What we have is not, we have a corporate dictatorship. And that's kind of my first thought about yesterday.
Well, really, you have to start there. I mean, I agree with you. You have to start there. The system is so flawed. I mean, there's so much spin on the spin that, who's got the time to figure it out? And as you say, it spun so much by the time you try to figure out what would be good for us. Christy Clark says it's jobs, 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 and what else? Did you have anything else?
Balanced budget.
Yeah, but it's all meaningless rhetoric. And
it's all a pack of lies.
They're running the BC Hydro into the ground, and the debt is just mounting. It's billions and billions of hidden debt. We're never going to find out about, apparently.
And I'm all for jobs, 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 but at least let's spend the money on good stuff. I mean, she talks about the liquefied natural gas. It's based on fracking. She's going to frack a significant amount of the province. They're going to poison the water, they're going to poison the air, they're going to poison the land. And it's all based on that. It's fracking. So is that the kind of jobs we want?
And the NDP doesn't seem to have a problem with that.
No, they don't.
And it's kind of liberal light. We're going to do most of that stuff, but it's not going to be quite as bad. So elect us. I mean, do you want Site C's dam? Well, we're going to let the BC Utilities Commission decide on that. Don't let the public decide. How about taking a position? Say, elect us, no Site C dam. I can understand that. I might even vote for them based upon something like that. But going with this mealy mouth, we'll let the Utilities Commission make the decisions. No, they're bureaucracy. You're a government. You can say stuff like that. You can say, no, we're going to shut this down. But at the same time, we're going to have an economic boom in British Columbia because we're going to go to renewables. And we're going to start, putting technology in homes that reduces energy consumption, really does it. Not some window dressing. Take a very hard look at where we're using our energy. We never have to build another dam. And we'll have a boom to boot. We're spreading the wealth all over the province. But the NDP can't bring themselves to say something like that. So what are you going to do? In the end, it's like this. I think we're winning right now with a minority government. It's a precarious situation. The thing is that The media, it's all over the media. It's the instability of a minority government. Oh, it's all so shaky. The investors won't know what they're going to do.
No.
Well, the uncertainty that they're talking about is that corporations are certain they're going to get everything they need, everything they want, whatever you need, boys, come on in. You want to chop the top off a mountain? No problem. Oh, that one didn't work out too well. We're going to just chop the top off another mountain. Forget all about that first thing. You know, that's certainty. So we know for certain we're going to get, you know what, with those guys. So it's so ridiculous when you think about it. Well, oh, they have to go into the legislature and now talk about things and maybe compromise a little bit. What's wrong with that? But you know, you can almost be sure the NDP, they're not happy. They want the majority, just like the Liberals have it. And they'd be happy to upset the apple cart and go back to the polls if they thought they could get that majority. And so would the Liberals. So there's the problem. There's the instability, is all those people that just want to disrupt the system.
But if we had a PR voting system, everything would change. This entire election would have been very, very different and much, much better if we had proportional voting. And it's also more democratic because it gives the public more of a voice. 16% of the vote went to the Green Party.
Yeah.
That's 1/6. They should have 14 seats.
Yeah.
They got 3. And it's taken them how long? 50 years to get 1 and now 3, right? But with PR voting, they would have 20%. They'd for sure get 20%.
Yeah.
20%. And that's what they deserve because 20% of the public supports them. And if they're not doing the job, another party will immediately start up that's more green. And they'll start getting because people will support them. In our system, it's almost impossible to get a new party started.
Yeah.
And the corporations control the whole thing, which is why they won't give us PR. That's like one of the most fundamentally important things we've all got to think about right now is getting PR voting because it'll change the province for the better. It's more democratic. That's why they won't let us have it. That's why Trudeau promised it, because he knew people wanted it, but it was never in the cards. They will never let us have it. And I don't mean Trudeau. I mean the corporations that Trudeau works for. They have all the power right now, and they don't want to share any of it with us schlubs down here.
Not if they don't have to. But we might be in a situation where, you know, we're going to start to see how this works. Maybe, you know, the culture will shift enough. You know, the Liberals held the referendums on proportional representation around 2006, 2007. And, you know, we did have 57.5% or whatever of the public wanted to have it.
Yes.
But they had set the bar at 60%. So here was an undemocratic process to create democracy. They built in this block that wouldn't let us have it.
Yes, and remember the Brexit vote, which took place a very short while ago. It's 50% plus 1. Referendums are always 50% plus 1.
Yeah.
Gordon Campbell set it at 60% to make sure it didn't win. And when 57% lost to 43%, the NDP did not say one word. Not one word. I was watching very closely at that time. Nothing. Or if they did, it was never in the media, and they never complained about it.
Yeah.
And the media said not one word. So it just went by, this completely fraudulent, how dare they? But that's the way they treat us. We're totally irrelevant. We, the citizenry, and we're not even citizens anymore, now we're only taxpayers. Right?
Well, you know, the same public relations firms run both campaigns in 2013. We've talked
How about this time?
Well, we're going to find out. I didn't dig in and see who's running it. I think they hide deeper and deeper into the shadows.
Yes.
Like 2013, some of the main players were seen out in the light of day, and we spotted them, and we found out, oh my gosh, the same PR firms are running the Liberal and the NDP campaign. And not only the election campaign, they don't go away, Jack. They're there all the time, giving them talking points, telling them what issues are issues and what aren't issues. They collaborate just so closely. And if you look at the federal NDP and the federal Conservatives, lots of overlap there. Lots of initiatives that they both were working on together that weren't democratic. You know, and if you go way back, you know, the shining knight of the NDP and a fellow that I really did respect was Jack Layton. But you know, Jack Layton played a major role in bringing down the Liberal government to bring in the Conservatives. And now the NDP are saying, oh, we've learned a lesson on that. What lesson is there? You were bringing in a fascist conservative. What do you got to know here? You're supposed to be a left winger. What is there that you haven't explained to?
Yeah. Corporate policy was to bring in Stephen Harper, and everybody played along.
Yeah.
They destroyed Paul Martin, completely destroyed Paul Martin. And I'm not necessarily a big fan of Paul Martin, but it bothers me when the corporations get together and their media destroys a government, and then we end up with Stephen Harper and now we've got the next Stephen Harper, Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah. I just want to say a word about housing and homelessness. I want to repeat I believe the fact that for sure housing and homelessness, expensive housing and homelessness are just two sides of the same coin. The underlying problem is a shortage of housing. And I think that shortage of housing has been deliberately created by corporate Canada.
Yeah.
And working together with our governments. I read that they used to build, I think it was 20,000 units a year in Canada. 20,000 units. For the last 10 years, we'd have an extra 200,000 units of good housing in the country. Instead, we have, they just don't do it anymore. It's deliberate. They want to push house prices up because they're putting everybody in debt, they're destabilizing the economy, and at the same time, the corporate rulers, are creating homelessness, which is also destabilizing our society in so many ways. What kind of governance is this? This is what we're up against. And this election with Christy and John and Andrew, it doesn't even touch that. Everybody's pretending that this, without looking at what's really happening.
Yeah.
All the media is controlled by half a dozen corporations. Housing and homelessness are deliberate. High house prices and homelessness are deliberate. They're destroying our healthcare system. They're planning on fracking everywhere. I've just heard that Site C isn't going to cost $10 billion because when they say $10 billion, they don't include interest. It's really $25 billion.
Oh, okay.
And they just, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing is about, commodities and trading and stock market and all that stuff, well, that's what's happened here in BC. Houses and properties are commodities. They forget that people actually have to find a place to live.
Let's not forget, they don't care.
No, I know. But, and a lot of that money, where's that money coming from? It's coming in from overseas. There's a massive worldwide black market, of course, and almost every commodity, but there's a flood of cash. They got to get rid of this cash. They got to spend it and launder it. And all those condos, especially in Vancouver and all the major cities, thousands of these empty units, nobody's going to ever move in there. They're just flipping them, selling them. So we're in the middle of just, creating this way to launder dirty drug money or whatever
and
else.
These are our houses, our homes where our communities and society are supposed to thrive and our people are supposed to live and children are supposed to grow up. They don't care. They've just turned it into a moneymaker for themselves.
Yeah, it's getting, we have a crisis, of course. There's always going to be a homeless camp somewhere, especially in Vancouver and Victoria. Yes, we haven't solved the crisis by sticking a few people in some housing, and we're still going down. So that's going to become, what's above a crisis, a catastrophe. I don't know, but nothing's being remedied there. And as long as they allow the real estate market to go the way it is right now, that's going to create massive instability everywhere. It creates inflation.
And Walt, we're out of time. We're going to have to leave right there. Thank you very much for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.
So welcome back to segment 2 of Citizens Forum. We have with us today Alex Robb, who's a general manager of Tree Dispensary, is a cannabis dispensary here in Victoria. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Thanks very much.
I'm reading your press release that you've endorsed a slate of green candidates on southern Vancouver Island, and maybe you could just tell us why you endorsed those green candidates and What do you think that they have in the Green Party, that platform and policies that might help us legalize and decriminalize marijuana in Canada?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself.
Okay.
I mean, I am the general manager of Trees Dispensary. We have 6 locations on Vancouver Island, 5 of them in Victoria. But I'm also an avid political enthusiast.
Yeah.
I've done 2 degrees in political science, and I've been a student of politics my whole life. And so I was paying very close attention to this provincial election because we know that cannabis is going to be legalized by July of 2018 by the federal government. And the government that's elected in this provincial election is going to be the government that determines how cannabis will be legalized in BC.
Yeah.
So myself and a group of other local Vancouver Island cannabis industry people, people who run other dispensaries, people who run bakeries, people who are licensed under the former MMAR that became the ACMPR. This is the Designated Grower Program.
Right.
Somebody who's ill could designate a grower to grow for themselves.
So we're talking medical marijuana.
We're talking medical marijuana on the island.
Okay.
And this is something that the island has produced for a very long time.
Yeah.
We all got together and said, what are the parties saying? Who's going to best serve the interests of British Columbia cannabis industry?
Yeah.
And we were worried a little bit about the NDP. Many of us are progressively minded, left-leaning. I've been voting NDP my entire life. But then when I heard John Horgan talking about selling it in liquor stores, when I heard the idea that the BCGEU were supporting the NDP and wanted to be able to sell it in government liquor stores, I was very wary of that, and I was very wary for 2 reasons. 1, I don't think that it makes sense to sell cannabis alongside liquor. 2, our own business is a local, small-scale, private dispensary model. And then 3, this is not a way necessarily that's going to protect the industry on Vancouver Island today, because I would suspect that the cannabis that they'd be selling in liquor stores would be produced by the licensed producers, these large corporations, mainly in Ontario. Most of them are in Ontario.
Yeah.
And that didn't seem to me to be a way to preserve the existing industry. And it's been estimated 27,000 jobs in British Columbia that are currently full-time in the cannabis industry.
That's quite remarkable. 27,000 jobs.
Yeah. So that's one reason why I just couldn't support the NDP. But then on the other hand, the Green Party was coming out very strongly saying, we want to support this craft industry that has grown up on Vancouver Island. The Green Party recognized that cannabis is part of a green economy. This is a sustainable economy.
Yeah.
This is not an economy that extracts from the land and then sells it somewhere else. This is an economy that's reproductive and that can potentially offer real good jobs for people as well as value added to the economy.
Yeah. So, okay, let's just for my own knowledge, we have legalization, and then we have decriminalization. Is there a difference, and what is that about?
Well, it depends how they legalize or how they
Yeah.
decriminalize. The federal government announced that what it wants to do is legalize, but then still make it a criminal offense to operate outside the legal system. And so there's
Yeah.
going to be, according to the latest draft legislation, this
Yeah.
perverse situation where they're legalizing cannabis, but you can go to jail for 14 years if you're selling cannabis outside of the legalized system. And it's looking like they're preferring a legalized system that's going to be one that is sort of a licensed oligopoly,
Yeah.
like the telecom companies, you know?
Yeah.
The federal government says, you guys can do
Okay.
this, nobody else can do this, and
Yeah.
you pay a fee to us, and you'll be the only ones that provide this service for the rest of the country.
Yeah.
And that was our worry. So decriminalization, on the other hand, it might mean that there's no specific legal framework that the federal government comes up with, but they take it off of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, which
Yeah.
would mean that it's no longer a criminal offense to produce it or be in its possess it. And in that case, it could really open it up into a market that the existing cannabis economy could join and really
That's
sort
right.
of come
That-
above ground and
you
start
know-
really paying taxes.
Now, how about, I don't know how this works, but how do you check about, for instance, is marijuana or cannabis growing, is that considered to be an organic activity, or is it, or are there chemical fertilizers and stuff used?
Well, it depends on the methods of the grower. And so many of the cannabis products that we retail in our dispensaries are 100% organic. That is to say, they don't use chemical fertilizers, they don't use chemical pesticides that are dangerous. They try to use, for example, neem oil instead, or and they grow with soil. Now, there are a lot of people who do use chemical fertilizers, but that's common in any agricultural industry. And we've also seen that the licensed producers have had to recall items because they were using dangerous pesticides.
Oh,
so it
interesting.
varies. I think that a lot of the responsible growers, the people who really see this as a craft, they're focused on doing it organic, in soil, the right way to produce a really clean product. The government has talked, the federal government that is, has talked a lot about the need to be sure that the cannabis is clear of contaminants and that it's safe, and that can be easily done. I mean, I think what they should be doing is focusing on ensuring that there's proper testing labs out there and that every grower has its product tested to ensure that they're not using dangerous contaminants.
Yeah.
But aside from that, they don't need to be practicing the kind of pharmaceutical grade sterility that the licensed producers claim that they practice, because this is a crop. Like it grows like tomatoes.
Yeah, the thing is that I thought maybe you've answered the question, because I think it's strange that it's taking so long for the federal government to get their act together. I mean, okay, there's a few things you have to do, but really we're not really talking about the legislation side of it. We're really talking about production, aren't we? And it's just that they don't have these massive facilities that I think they're going to want to have. And that's what they're sort of dragging their feet on.
Exactly. And I can circle back to why we supported the Green Party here too. Because Andrew Weaver said that he thinks, and the Green Party position is, the federal government should just take it off of the CDSA and forget about the business of controlling who produces it and who doesn't produce it.
Yeah.
And that to us was a clear signal that he understands that this is an attempt by the federal government to try to control an industry, and an industry that's already grown up on Vancouver Island and provided so much to our economy, provided so many jobs. That's right. If they said that they wanted to legalize cannabis, they could have legalized cannabis within the first 6 months of being in power.
And it's going to save a lot of money in the courts and all the legal system of the cops busting kids and all that nonsense. I mean, we've just had enough of that.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that, I mean, I'm more or less more interested, I think, in the recreational use of marijuana. That's what I see more of it going on. And I don't see, and I've never seen a problem, even when I was a kid, and teenager and young adult, and, the culture was there. But I never saw, other than people sometimes getting a little inebriated, a little more than they should be, and having a nap, nobody ever seemed to be getting high on marijuana and robbing banks or anything. You know what I mean? But
That's right.
If you looked at
or getting into fights,
if
like
you look at
alcohol, for example.
Yeah, alcohol consumption downtown here on a Friday night or Saturday night, it's a brawl. The cops are at it, the lights are flashing, and that's a regulated substance that the government's controlling. And you really wonder, well, why is it they're so happy about that and they're so freaked out about legalizing marijuana? So, I mean, to me, I think the corporate sector is trying to get in there, and as I think, as you said, if you have proper testing facilities, that no matter who's producing, this product has to be sent to a third-party lab that has no interest in your business whatsoever, and they're going to tell you exactly what's in there, what isn't. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think that this is where the provincial government really has a role, and this is why it's so important that we focus on the provincial government as a center for the regulation of cannabis. Because it's going to be up to them to come up with a regime to ensure the safety of the cannabis that's being processed on the island, or potentially even produced on the island. The federal government wants to own that and to have that as part of their jurisdiction, but really it should be a provincial matter. And so one of the things I'd like to see in a legalized framework is this kind of certifying the laboratories that test and ensuring that people who retail cannabis or grow cannabis are having their products tested. And then second, ensuring that there's a mechanism for the safe processing of cannabis. And so this is one of the things that is the reason, part of one of the reasons why we got so involved in this provincial election is that immediately before this provincial election, the Vancouver Island Health Authority issued a ban on the retail of edible cannabis products in dispensaries on Vancouver Island. And so part of the city of Victoria, when they were bringing in licensing for cannabis retail, they didn't talk about edibles because they understood it's VHA's jurisdiction to determine edibles.
Yeah.
Now VHA has come out and said they can't approve of any edible product any cannabis edible product as a food ingredient because there's no way for them there's no framework within which they can approve it as a food ingredient.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'd really like to see from a new provincial government is for them to come up with a mechanism or a regime to inspect facilities like commercial bakeries that are producing cannabis products as edibles or oils or other things to ensure that they're safe so that they can be sold to the consumer, and then to approve it as a food product. And I think that this just makes a lot of sense because it follows from Supreme Court precedent of ensuring that patients have access to cannabis in their preferred form. That's the Smith case that was fought here in Victoria by the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Cooperative. But then it also makes sense because it provides some kind of regulation and even protection for something that's already grown up on Vancouver Island.
Yeah.
And this is this industry that we have here that's not just growing cannabis, but that's turning it into brownies, turning it into oils and capsules, making it into these derivative products that are really what patients want.
No, we touched on this a little bit just before for the show, talking about mail order and finding markets internationally. How complicated would that be? Because although it would be legal in Canada, maybe it's not legal in Taiwan or something. So what would be the problem there?
Well, and this is where we get to what the federal government's true jurisdiction is. It shouldn't be up to the federal government to determine who produces cannabis and who doesn't produce cannabis.
Yeah.
But it should be up to the federal government to determine who imports cannabis and who exports cannabis and what are going to be the rules around that, and to negotiate treaties with international partners to determine that well, first of all, that they're fair trading, and then second of all, that the products are certifiable and safe. And so this is something that I think that the province of British Columbia has a real interest in, is getting the federal government to sort of get its mind off of thinking that it's going to extend its jurisdiction to do something like what you can grow in your own garden, right? And whether you can sell it to your neighbor or not. The city of Victoria just passed a bylaw making sure that you could grow crops and food in your garden and be able to have a food stand. I mean, in a legalized marketplace, you'd think that you could do the same thing with cannabis, but that's not what the federal government wants to see.
But that's interesting, though, because, like, you know, if you were to say alcohol, you could go to the U-Brew and make yourself some beer and wine. There doesn't seem to be a problem with that.
Exactly, yeah. But on the other hand, if you wanted to retail it internationally, then you'd really want to make sure that it was being certified and was being approved. And this is where Vancouver Island has a tremendous possibility for an export economy.
That's right.
We're already producing all of these, not just this great cannabis that gave the name BC Bud, but also all of these great cannabis derivative products. And I'm talking about balms and salves and capsules and oils and any number of things that would be and could be exported internationally.
Well, it'd be great for the BC. Like, we were exporting all our raw resources, and why not create something with value added and just more work for us in British Columbia? Going to have to cut you off right there, Alex. Very interesting topic. There's a lot of intricacies that we have to be concerned about here, and I think the public deserves to have a full awareness of what these things are. So that wraps up this segment of Citizen Forum, and stay tuned. Jack will be right back.
Welcome back. This is segment 3 of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Wednesday, April the 10th. I'd like to start by thanking our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this show happen every 2 weeks. Our guest this segment is Ross Crockford of JohnsonStreetBridge.org. And really, you've been a hero on this issue for a long, long time. I just want to go back to when it all started, because we were just chatting about that. And the whole thing started with a fire on the Bay Street Bridge. And maybe you can just mention what happened next. And this was a long time ago.
Yeah, this was 2004, something like that. It's and what happened was with the fire, the money or in this municipal budget was allocated towards repairs that were done on the Bay Street Bridge, and that was why maintenance was stopped on the Johnson Street Bridge. The money was never put back into the budget to continue to maintain the Johnson
So
Street
what
Bridge.
happened is that after 2004, the city stopped maintaining which means painting and just keeping it looking nice. Okay, so then when was the election that really started this whole thing? Because I think this is all part of the plan.
It's a very long story now. We've been following this for quite a while. Okay, so the municipal election was in November of 2008.
So 4 years after that, okay.
Yes, and by that time, quite a bit of deterioration had set in. But prior to that election, when Alan Lowe was the mayor, he asked for a condition assessment of the old bridge that was going to be done by Delcan, but that wasn't presented to councillors until early in 2009, which was a whole new council. And that was the council that got this report saying old bridge repair for 25 million or new bridge for 40 million. And on that basis, the council of the day voted for a new bridge for $40 million.
Okay, so at that time the price was $40 million.
For a new bridge, yeah. That was a
And it was going to cost as much or more to repair the old bridge?
No, it was 25 at that time.
Okay.
20.
Oh, right, that's how
ballpark
this
to
whole thing
25
started,
million
right?
for-
Because
yeah.
after the election, and the election was what year? 2000?
November 2008.
So it wasn't an election issue, but immediately after the election, it suddenly became a big issue.
Yes.
Because the bridge wasn't looking good. And remember, the maintenance money had been taken away 4 years earlier. Okay.
So it's a very long, convoluted story.
Yeah. So it started off with build a new bridge for 40 million. And
Yes.
that's where you got involved to force a referendum on the issue, right?
Well, that was, yeah, and there was a petition at the end of 2009, and that forced the referendum that was at the end of 2010.
Okay, so the
and,
referendum is
And by the end of
2010.
2010, the budget on the project was up to $77 million for the new
Okay.
bridge. And so now we're at 105.
Okay, just let's go back to the 77 million for the new
Okay,
bridge
sure.
in 2010.
Yes.
Now, we voted in a referendum.
Yes.
But the story was that repairing the old bridge was going to cost more.
Yes, and the reason for that.
So, of course, we voted to build a new bridge for
Right,
75 million.
but the reason why it cost so much was because the council wanted a so-called apples-to-apples comparison, and the comparison was how much, or a new. It was based on the idea that a new bridge would last for 100 years. So the question was, how much will it cost to maintain the existing bridge for 100 years, and that's why it became
so expensive
$80 million
to fix the
or
old
$90
bridge.
million.
But if we go back to when this, even before this all started, the actual first recommendation to our city council from the engineers who were hired by city council was to repair the bridge for, I think it was $8.9 million.
Yeah, 8.6 million.
8.6
And it was
million.
now that was never actually put to the council. That was discovered through FOI requests by Focus Magazine.
By Focus Magazine.
And
Yeah, they
that
do
was
such good work.
and that was a recommendation that was made by the engineer who ultimately became the sort of main proponent of the replacement bridge. But he originally stated that it could be repaired for 8.6 million with a modest seismic upgrade. And the real sort of, whether that number is accurate is of course questionable. It could be more than that. It could be 10, 12, 15 million dollars, but
Don't make me
still
laugh here.
but very modest compared to what is now a $105 million replacement bridge. But the really sort of shocking thing was that when it was revealed that this letter existed, it was sort of written in the end of 2008. When council found out about it, they didn't cross-examine or demand to know why this number had increased so much. Instead, they just sort of allowed that letter to exist without any kind of question.
And this is our city council. This is the way things always seem to work, and this is the way we get treated. who made the decision not to show City Council the $8.6 million repair estimate for the Blue Bridge? Remember, this is where it all started, $8.6 million.
Well, I mean, this happens a lot with reports that are sort of presented to councillors, and there's a lot of questions about at what point information is to be presented to councillors, and it certainly became an issue around this bridge as the project developed, because there were all sorts of other things that were considered to be premature or incomplete information, which was not shared with the council, and then when it was discovered afterwards, again through freedom of information requests,
The council does nothing.
well, in some cases they have. I mean, we're now talking about a very long period of time, and later on, when other revelations came out about how that the cost was going to go up of the project, then there were all sorts of repercussions for people on city staff who had not sort of told council about that right away.
There were repercussions.
Yes, oh, sure. And this is, the thing now is that at City Hall, I mean, there are almost, I think actually there are no staff members left who were involved with the project when it started.
Yes. I'd just like to say that the $8.6 million estimate for, which was the original recommendation from the engineers way back when, to repair the old bridge for $8.6 million. That was reported on in Focus magazine prior to the referendum. And in the referendum, we were told it was going to cost more to fix the old bridge than to build a new bridge for $75 million, right?
Right.
And the rest of the city's media never reported that number. And Focus magazine just isn't big enough. So the voting public went and voted, even though city council knew, and a few people knew, and Focus magazine was reporting it. It was basically kept secret from the people of the city. And look where we are now. We're spending $100 million that we don't have
Yes.
to fix city council or more.
I mean, the budget right now is 105, and the big question is how much more it's going to increase, because as most people know, the main lifting span of the bridge is still in China. It's supposed to be painted at this moment, and is supposed to be on a boat coming from China at the end of this month. Well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Is it going to actually be loaded onto the freighter at the end of May? And of course, then they have to get it here. They actually have to erect it and install it and make it work. And that's not a simple process. And the deadline for all of this stuff is the end of 2017. So there's a lot of work still to be done. And there are costs still to come around the fendering of the bridge to protect it from any kind of hit.
Now you have a picture of how, the wheel with no hub, and maybe that leads us to the why
yes,
so
I sent
long
you
and
some
why
photographs.
so expensive.
So one of the questions that a number of people have is why is it taking so long, and why is it so expensive? And all this sort of comes back to the design of the bridge, and the essential sort of thing to know is that with a regular movable bridge, is usually lifted on an axle, on a standard fixed solid axle. So it's to be the same, if you imagine like an axle on a car or on a bicycle wheel or something like that, and the wheel around it is sort of held in place by spokes or a solid rim or something like that. What's unusual about the bridge that we're building is that we're essentially building a hubless wheel. We're building a wheel that has no central axle and no spokes, or in this case, it has one big spoke. And so the trouble is that means that all of the mechanics, all of the moving parts are on the outside of the rim rather than being connected to the axle. And this is way more complicated. If you try to do this with a bicycle, I sent you this photograph, you have huge loads which are being put on. That wheel has to support, the weight that's put on it. In this case, this wheel has to support the lifting part of the bridge, the span. There's all sorts of wind load on it, and there's various things hanging off of it. And so the worry is if there's any kind of deflection or twisting of these wheels, that they're not going to track properly any longer. So this has been hugely complicated in making sure that that's right. That was very complicated in the design. And then now in the fabrication of it, it's taken so long because in order to make that work, they have to make the bridge as light as possible. So instead of being just a bunch of girders like the old bridge that are riveted together, this thing is more like an airplane wing. So it's highly specialized welding. It's essentially hollow. There are photographs of the deck of the bridge that you can see that there are all sorts of chambers to it to keep it as light as possible. But this means a lot of welding. And this is where the trouble has been in China is that the standards, they haven't welded this much to that kind of standard before in this factory. And the inspectors were saying, that these welds are not sufficient. Steel had to be scrapped. They had to redo the welds. And so, but again, this is something that extends from the
what do
design.
they know about welding in China?
Well, they do lots of welding in China,
Exactly.
but this is highly specialized
exactly.
welding, right? And so, so that's the reason why it's taken so long and why it's so expensive, But there are further consequences from that, and one is my concern is about how robust this bridge is going to be if it gets hit. And the old bridge that's there actually has been hit over its history. There's a incident in 1959 where a tug went through and tore out the main girder under the old bridge, and it was inoperable. But they, because we had shipyards here that did all sorts of steel work, they were able to fabricate another girder. They spliced it in, and the bridge was only closed for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, it was operating again. That's not going to happen with the bridge that we're building. It's very delicate. If it's like bashed out of
Well, that's what you
alignment,
want, a delicate bridge. You want a delicate bridge.
Yeah, but that also opens the city to a certain degree of liability, right? If someone the owner of that tug is going to say, you can't blame me entirely for the damage caused by my boat hitting the bridge because you built something that was ridiculously sensitive to any kind of damage. So that's potential liability for the city. And then the other, one of the things that you are interested in is rail. And this is
Yes. Ross, we're out of time, so I'll just mention the rail. To me, the number one thing, even as disastrous as the whole story is, the loss of the rail bridge is even more disastrous to this city. But there's still hope, because as Ross mentioned on the radio a couple of months ago, the existing Blue Bridge can be used to bring rail into the city.
And there's a photograph I sent you of a locomotive on the rail span.
Okay.
Because it was actually built or the road span. It was actually built to carry rail in 1924.
Ross, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome back. This is the last segment being filmed on Wednesday, May the 10th. Our guest in this segment is Will Smith. Will is also the director of this show. So Will, you want to start by talking about Canada leading?
Yes, I read this article in, I can't remember what, it was an online journal, about how YouTube has this pilot program, and I haven't really investigated it because I don't have a cell phone, so I can't wander around and take videos, but Canadians stream 15% more videos than any other country, so we lead in people saying, hey, that's really cool. Take a video, send it to somebody. And I think that's really exciting because I think that's the new media, frankly. I mean, I think that YouTube is, if I want to go someplace and find out about something, I tend to go to YouTube now rather than some trusted news source, because I trust people who put stuff up on YouTube. And I just think it's really cool that Canada's leading. And ICTV, our nonprofit
Society.
independent community television Victoria, I want us to really take a look at that and try to get more people involved in showing what the real news is, because I think it's important. I think it's really important that we all, especially since we live in supposedly a democracy, and one of the main things about being in a democracy is that you stay informed.
Yes, that is one of the main things about being in democracy. You have to be informed, and
Right,
it's very,
so-
very difficult these days.
So I think we can do that. I think we're in the middle of a technological revolution that's hard to. It's moving so fast. It's hard for us to even sort of keep track of it. And that leads us into the next thing I want to talk about is another area where Canada leads, and that's in cannabis. And I was reading some articles about what's going on. I set a news alert so that I get news alerts in all sorts of different languages anytime cannabis shows up in the newspaper somewhere. So it's been kind of funny, especially since the elections in the United States, because it's like a bull in a china shop. Things are changing so fast, all these arbitrary decisions. And so as a result, countries that normally pay very strict attention to what the United States guidelines are on things are just saying, oh, we're not going to pay attention to them anymore. So it's kind of like, in some ways it's like a circus, or the Keystone Cops. It's like everybody's in a different movie and nobody really knows what's going on. So I may have brought this up before, but in Mexico, the Mexican parliament unanimously legalized cannabis back in January. The German parliament unanimously legalized medical cannabis. And now the Germans, I noticed in the German press, they're looking to Canada for guidelines. So Canada is the leader as far as, you know, anything official. There are all sorts of unofficial things going on, but officially the Canadian government is the one government that really has a lot of guidelines in place. No matter how, I mean, they're arguably good or bad, but at least there's something there in a.
Yeah, I'm afraid they're going to be very bad. But if
But
they're the
it's
ones
really
setting the
interesting that
standard-
everybody's focusing on looking
yeah.
at Canada to lead now, because
yeah.
I'm not sure that that's something that
Yeah.
has been.
I mean, I don't know anything about it, but I'd like to see it not corporatized, if possible. I've heard that if you want to produce under the guidelines and you want to get into the market, you got to have millions of dollars.
Yeah, we're going to see. I think we'll see some changes. I've noticed some kind of funny things there too. One of the funny things is, of course, now there's a lot of money involved, and it's a $20 billion market in the United States in the next couple of years, and I think it's really going to be bigger than that. But Forbes is already, one of the main financial magazines in the United States is reporting on price. And there's no market yet. There's no formal market. So all the pricing information is not gained from exchange trading. There's no price discovery as far as traditional financial markets. It's all, in fact, you can't even get a bank account if you're involved in the industry. Nevertheless, Forbes is reporting on price trends. The cannabis price is rebounding a little bit after the dives last year, which is kind of funny for me as a financial trader to find Forbes commenting on something that's still illegal in a lot of places, and there are no markets.
How's it doing in Washington, Colorado, and California?
Well, that's another interesting thing there. That's because there are some more bipartisan, or some more. They're passing laws in these places to keep local government officials from aiding the federal government in the United States, so that they can't continue on with interdiction in the places where the states have declared it legal. So I
Yes.
find that to be
the U.S. government still wants
interesting-
it to be illegal.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting
for
that people are crossing party lines. It doesn't matter whether they're Republicans or Democrats. Just don't tell the feds
One thing they
anything.
can all
Don't
agree
help
on
the
is
feds.
smoking
Don't help
dope.
the feds. Yeah. So it's really, and then we have Uruguay, where it's been legalized. You'll be able to go into a pharmacy in Uruguay in July and buy cannabis if you're an Uruguayan. You can't if you're from a foreign country. But the price, it's a fixed price, and it's $1.30 US, I think. So that's less than $2 Canadian. I don't have that number on the top of my head, but for a gram. So, and that's another thing I think is going to be very interesting to watch, because if you look at the price of basil, I decided to look at basil. It's a very common plant that's fairly easy to grow. That's a lot of it's grown. I can't get good numbers because cannabis has been illegal for so long. But if you thought that maybe the amount of basil consumed in the world approaches the amount of cannabis, basil currently sells for about $8 a pound for organic gourmet basil, a pound of basil
$8
leaf,
a pound,
dried
okay.
leaf, and $80 a pound for the oil, for the extracted oil.
Now, cannabis is approximately as easy to grow as basil.
I think so. I mean, I don't really know about this stuff, but I just suspect that we're going to see some precipitous price drops in cannabis. And I think some of the excitement, I mean, you have to look at, people
We
are
won't
trying to
see
figure
price
out,
drops.
people
They'll
are
keep
trying
the
to
price
figure
up, I
out
hope.
what has happened with cannabis. I mean, you see this, it's very obvious that since cannabis has been illegal for so long, people have just, they haven't talked about it. It hasn't been on their radar. And I was reading an article yesterday about, not yesterday, but this weekend, about Australia. They're going back in looking at the history of Australia. The history of Australia is supposedly centered around it being a prison colony. I mean, you've heard that, right? That Australia, well, it turns out that was kind of a cover for a big hemp growing operation, because cannabis is really an economic driver. It's a plant that has a lot of uses, and that brings up another interesting thing that I think we're going to see is that's really the main thing about cannabis, is that it is going to replace a lot of the things that petroleum is used for right now. This plastics, the possibility for cannabis-based plastics is just now coming out. And of course the chemistry, the polymers and all that, the way the chemistry works is pretty much the same as I understand. I'm not a chemist, I'm a high school graduate, so don't believe me about this stuff, but it looks like some of the chemistry is applicable to developing hemp-based or cannabis-based plastics. So that can replace the polymer situation that we have right now, the dependency on petroleum.
Do you have any idea, like plastics are very toxic now in many ways.
Yeah.
Is a cannabis-based plastic going to be cleaner?
And that's what I believe that's so, and but I don't really know yet. It's just, I'm just starting to see that show up, that the plastic and cannabis in the same news article. I haven't seen a whole lot of that. Again, it's been illegal for such a long time. The only place it's really been legal for it to be researched is in Israel, and Israel is leading that as far as getting, they've led as far as understanding how cannabis works. And what we're seeing now, it's really kind of funny, Jack. I can't help but think that back 100 years ago, they just decided to make cannabis illegal just for not really very good reasons and not really knowing very much about it.
Oh, I think they had very good reasons.
Well,
they
yeah,
didn't want it.
they had some reasons, but I'm not sure that it wasn't a science-based.
Oh no, it was money-based. They
right.
wanted to get rid of.
So now what we're seeing is it's a miracle cure
yeah.
for all these modern diseases. And here, I mean, I know we heard the story of Corey Yelland, and her doctor said, when she said, what about cannabis? Because he had said, you have 3 months to live. And when she said, what about cannabis? And he said, la, 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 I'm not listening to you, la, la, la. To me, that's not medicine. That's not, just as, I mean, what I'm seeing with some of the play acting, I mean, the justice is, this isn't really real. This is all an act. And then, so what we see now is that cannabis is perhaps something that's just necessary for health. It was in the food chain before, it's been taken out, and now we have all these diseases. So maybe once it gets back in the food chain, everything's going to be okay in some of these nastier things. I mean, all Crohn's disease, cancer, Alzheimer, all the stuff, the MS, all these different things that it can be used for. It's really fascinating for me. I'm just having a great time watching it and seeing the attitudes of all the different nationalities of how they're handling it.
Well, let's hope for the best. I mean, it's a great plant. It's ridiculous that it's illegal, so we're moving on. Did you want to talk a little bit about YouTube TV?
Well, yeah, just to go back to the...
Or you can continue on cannabis, up to you.
Well, let's see. I don't think I really have anything more I want to say right now, except I'm just going to keep watching the situation. I think that I did want to mention that one of the things that, as far as consciousness goes, just the way I look at it, I watched a documentary by Michael Pollan called The Botany of Desire. And he takes 4 plants, and as if the plants have intelligence and as if the plants went to survive. And so he takes apples and cannabis and tulips and potatoes. And so you're seeing the world from the sort of the plant wants to propagate. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at the situation that we have right now, because I think we can look at the whole world and say, you know, it's some things that need to be fixed up. I mean, there's some places that need to be cleaned up. There's some areas, a lot of cleaning.
Yes.
So if we look at perhaps we look at Earth as a sentient that's kind of so far out of our realm that we can't even communicate with her, and if we look at cannabis as some kind of sentient, that there is some kind of volition there, and we watch what happens now, and we say, well, maybe the Earth wants to clean up what's been done to her, and maybe cannabis is part of that cleanup effort. I think it helps you focus on what's really going on, because an awful lot of these people who are making the rules really have a lot less control over this situation than they think they do. At least that's what I'm seeing.
I hope you're right on that. Yeah, but they do seem to have a lot of control.
Well, so let's look at the YouTube. I mean, YouTube has just been the go-to now for anything. If you want to learn how to play a piece on the guitar, if you want to learn how to make something in the kitchen, I suppose if you wanted to learn how to grow cannabis, there are YouTubes on it. And you know, we were looking at, when we were talking about what's happening now, YouTube is coming out with a TV channel. So if you want to subscribe to US TV, the main channels, you can pay $30-some a month and watch them on YouTube. So I think we're going to see a lot.
Is that already in place?
I'm not sure about that, but I think we're going to see more of that. And you know, that's the kind of thing that I want to embrace with our community television, is just putting things up. And so maybe YouTube is really a good place for us to engage our community here in Victoria. And so,
And the world.
yeah, and the world. I mean, it's
That's the beauty of YouTube.
yeah, the world is getting smaller thanks to things like YouTube and Facebook. So let's keep a look on that. I really keep a watch on that, keep looking at it, see how we can participate in that, especially here in Victoria, where we've got so many great ideas on how we can make our world better.
Will, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me again.
And thanks everybody for watching Citizens Forum this week. So now, this is being filmed on Wednesday, May the 10th. The election was yesterday. And when this starts to show, well, it'll be an even more interesting time, and we'll comment on it again shortly. Thanks for watching.